Very interesting weekend of racing and some very interesting title implications. We're going to get into all that. We've just finished the Qatar Grand Prix, and this weekend we're going to work in chronological order of the Sunday races. We're going to start with Moto3 into Moto2, and we're going to get to the MotoGP stuff at the end because there is quite a bit to go over. As always, everything is chaptered down below. If you've got stuff you want to hear me talk about, it's important to you, skip ahead. You'll find it timed down below for you. This was a crazy race. It was almost more on edge and crazy than it usually is. It felt very much like the tension and the desperation of your title contenders was translating through the entire field. And everybody was doing things with absolute desperation from lap one. Like lap one was crazy. And everything felt desperate. Every move felt like the championship was on the line. And it would be like Riccardo Rossi passing Joel Kelso. But it would be like desperately, like they were fighting for the title. Like there was every move just had this weight to it. And this felt tense, this race, the whole way through. Again, it just has this way, doesn't it? It just always the most action-packed event of the weekend. And we have seen our second of 3 world championships now wrapped up by Jaume Masia, who was, I think, absolutely brilliant. Perhaps dodgy tactics aside, and look, this is the way it is, right? At no point did the stewards look at it and think to themselves, that was so out of order, I need to penalise that. Perhaps maybe they should have, especially when you look at some of the stuff that riders had been penalised for, even in MotoGP and stuff earlier in the season, I want to say, where guys were just getting sat up and then by other riders, and then that rider was getting penalised. I think we saw it happen to Quartararo. I can't recall the exact Grand Prix and the exact situations, but I do remember that. And now you've got to the point where there was a bit of backlash for that. So the response to that is that when something like this happens, there's no punishment at all. And twice Masia went in real aggressively on Sasaki. I mean, did disguise it well. It did make it look like he just missed his braking marker and just running wide, happened to take Sasaki. We only did it twice in the race, and it was the 2 times he was going up the inside of Sasaki, and I think it was turn 6. We then saw once Adrian Fernandez managed to work his way into that lead group, he roughed up Sasaki pretty bad. In the end of the day, there's no contacts. So, do you let the boys race? I'm inclined to say yes. As much as it does leave a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, I don't think there was anything that you could categorically look at and go, yeah, it probably is a penalty that. I mean, it's hard to say. It is hard to say. It was a little bit Anyway, we've ended up where we are. And then Masia's last few laps, when he did get to the front, were absolutely just the way he just went. And he has that in his locker, Jaume Masia, to just go and go when he gets to the front. And people just can't keep his pace. But I guess you want to win titles. Sometimes you've got to do the dodgy shit. And we've seen it with a lot of great champions in the past. Sometimes you got to get your hands dirty, and he was not shy in doing that. I mean, other stuff that happened. Dennis Onchu double long lap penalty for his jump start. Still ended up third. Shows that this kid's got a bit about him, and we do love the all-action Dennis Onchu. Definitely great to watch. Alonso seconds. That was what it was. It was just a fascinating race. The lead group did not thin out at all for the entirety. Championship run and won. Jaume Masia can relax next week in Valencia, although I can't see why I wouldn't just go for another win. But he has the luxury of just being able to pot around and do whatever he wants next weekend because he is now a world champion in Moto3. Moto2, speaking of world champions doing whatever they want, Acosta really did ride like he didn't need to be there this weekend. So just ended off, I think, 8th and just minded his own business. Whether he had the pace or not, or he just was a bit off it this weekend. Don't hurt yourself, lad. You've got a test on the Monday after Valencia on your first MotoGP bike. So yeah, don't put yourself at any risk. Why would you? We saw good performances here from Manuel Gonzalez picking up second place. Good to see him doing well. Aaron Canet in third. Ayagura was excellent to come through the field. I think we had Dixon after that. I thought this was a good race considering it was a runaway winner with Fermin Aldeguer, who, by the way, big chat about him later on when we get to the MotoGP section. Another runaway win for Fermin Aldeguer. 3 on the row. And this is starting to look a bit ominous now. This is starting to look very... I don't want to mention the second coming, Pedro Acosta. But Pedro at his best... This is what he does, and you got Fermin Aldeguer at his best doing this. Untouchable right now. And at the right time of the season, and like I said, we are going to talk about this later, at the right time of the season when there's rides up for grabs, and Fermin Aldeguer just going absolutely berserk out there on track, just winning everything. So Yeah, I thought this was a good race. There was entertaining battles throughout, I thought, and a really fascinating little, almost like a cat and mouse happening, with riders like Dixon and Ogura getting quicker as the race went on, and Canet getting slower, seemingly, and then having another bite at Gonzalez towards the end, and then a really tight finish over the line between them two. It was really good fun to watch, I thought. And now here we are, we're in MotoGP. We've skimmed over the juniors this week. Let's talk the big boys. Hello, Moto. Here we go. Of course, have to start with the performance from Fabio Diggia and Antonio. Absolutely doing the unthinkable here in Qatar. And from, you want to say, the better part of 2 seasons, unable to get it hooked up, really struggling, finishing absolutely the worst of the Ducati riders, sometimes finishing behind Hondas and Yamahas when all the other Ducatis are comfortably dispatching them. And then something's happened here where he's good now. He's good. It's all come a bit too late for him, unfortunately. But he was excellent in this race. Rode it like an experienced winner. Sat behind the world champion and current world championship leader. Hunted him, stalked him, put the move on him. Pecco looked like he was going to have a nibble back at him. And it was a shame that he got it wrong. Yeah, almost ended in disaster for both of them. But luckily we didn't get that. And Digi was fantastic. It was a very expertly ridden Grand Prix from him. And I very happy to see him do well, and fantastic imagery after the race of all the riders stopping to congratulate him. He looked like he was sobbing away inside his helmet there, and why wouldn't you? I mean, a lifelong dream has come through for a young man who has done well to turn his fortunes around. It takes a lot of, emotional and mental fortitude to be able to be down and out for that long and be able to go, no, I'm still going to try and find something. He knows his Grand Prix career for now is probably likely coming to an end in MotoGP, and maybe he'll have to step back to Moto2 or somewhere else. And he's just gone, you know what? I'm going to push and see if we can get something out of it. And he has done it. Good on him. Huge talking points in the title race here because Pecco Bagnaia has extended back out to a 21-point lead after it being reduced on Saturday to a 7-point lead. The contrasts in fortunes for him and Jorge Martin day to day here are astonishing. So Martin looked all but untouchable and unbeatable on Saturday. You could not get anywhere near the guy. Pecco struggling to 5th place in the sprint. Like I mentioned, points gap cutting to 7. We arrive on Sunday, and literally from the very first second of the race, and Martin does not get off the line. He gets buried in the pack, close to about 8th, 9th, 10th, I think he ended up, and just never ever showed up in that race again. Never once again did he threaten to even pull back time on the riders in front of him. And it's interesting because it seemed to be something similar that happened to each of them each day. They just did not have the pace. Now, after the Grand Prix, Jorge Martin has been scathing in his assessment of Michelin and his tyres that he had on the bike. He's saying he had bad tyres. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. And Michelin's said nothing really of note as of yet. They've merely said they're analysing the tyre data and they're going to be able to tell us soon if there was anything faulty or wrong with that tyre. I don't know if it has anything to do with the tyre pressures. Nothing about pressures has been mentioned, but whether they've gone ultra safe in order to make sure he doesn't get the penalty, and then it's made his tyre feel like shit because they need to get to the end of the Grand Prix with the certain tyre pressures at a certain level. I've not heard that mentioned, but I don't know if it's worth talking about or not. Maybe some people with a bit more inside knowledge would be able to tell me whether or not that's a factor. And look, it's not something that can't happen. You just get like a dodgy set of tyres that day. But I could imagine it's incredibly rare. And with Pecco, seemingly, he didn't say anything bad, negative about Michelin, but I guess there's the hint that he felt that way on Saturday about his tyres, that there was just something they didn't chase. I think he said they didn't change anything, but the pace wasn't there. So whatever that means, what else is there? I mean, was that his less direct way of saying we had a shit set of tyres? How common could a occurrence like this be that it affects each title contender day after day? I mean, I don't know. Like, there is a factor in this where, look, I'm not inclined to tell the guy is wrong. Maybe it is a bad set of tyres, but what does that even mean? Like, I don't have enough technical knowledge on rubber to know what that could possibly be. Like, is it labelled as the wrong compound? Like, what do they mean by that? Has it been stored wrong and it affects the grip in the tire or the hardness of the tire. I've got no idea what that means. I know that they're very complicated things, compounds and rubber compounds and things like that. Tires are a really complicated aspect of all kinds of motorsport. You know, I'm going to look into this more as the week goes on and see, especially if anything does come out from Michelin to explain what might have happened. Is there anything to the fact that maybe when he didn't get off the line well and the tire's spinning up and he's all over the place, is it just instantly in his head, this tire's fucked? This tire is fucked. I've got I've been given a dodgy set. Like, does that enter his mind straight away, whether it's true or not? And then once that is in your head, are you thinking to yourself, well, I can't brake that late here. I can't trail brake in this deep. So I've got to start braking a bit earlier. I can't accelerate this. I can't accelerate this hard. I've got a dodgy set of tires on. Look what it did to me on the line. I can't lean in at this angle, at this speed. And is it just because it's in your head that you've been given a dodgy set of tires because of what happened off the line? Is that then just playing on your mind? Obviously, all speculation from me trying to be like the amateur psychologist that I am, and just overanalyze it a bit. But no, is that playing into it? Is that a part of it? Could that be the factor? If Michelin comes out in a day's time or 2 days' time and say, look, we've looked at all the data, we've analysed the tyre, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, then I can't see what else it could be unless they've messed with the tyre pressures to maybe run different tyre pressures from Saturday because they actually have to get through a longer race. That's the only other thing it could be. But it is interesting, and I will wait till we hear from Michelin on this one, because if it does turn out to be a fault on the tyre, it's absolutely, I mean, it's really unlucky, but I guess it's the same as having a fault on your bike or in your engine or something. The thing with motorsport is you can be as good as you want. You're always at the whim of the reliability of bike parts or car parts or whatever, and tyre is one of them. I know it's a part that is supposed to be uniform, same for everyone, but it can happen. Sometimes you can have an electronics failure or whatever it is. Is this a failure on the tyres? Maybe. We'll wait to see. So where does this leave us in the title fight? Basically, the way it is now, it just seems like obviously all sorts of mathematical things can happen with non-finishes and etc. But basically, Martin has to win 2 races now. He has to go and win 2 races in Valencia, which, by the way, he's perfectly capable of doing. I would absolutely not put it past this lad that he can go and just win 2 races and absolutely smash everyone in Valencia. But even then, he needs other results to go his way in terms of where Pecco's finishing. But I just think he just needs to go and win the 2 races, which, like I said, he can do, and just hope for the best. There's nothing else he can do. I don't think there's any part of it where it's like there'll be no roughing up and things like that we saw with Masia in Moto3. I just think he'll get his head down and try and win the 2 races, and that's all he can really do. And in the race, I mean, the other notable performance I can think of is Marini had a really strong weekend, and just looks like these rumours of a factory Repsol Honda ride have given him a bit of confidence. He's got a bit of swagger about him there. He was brilliant this weekend, I thought. And, almost forgot. If we go back to the start of the weekend, we had the incident between Morbidelli and Aleix Espargaro. Altercation coming together. Maybe someone was riding slow on the line, maybe on the racing line. Maybe they weren't. Maybe someone went and slow, so they went past them and then they tried to get them back and then they run off the road. Anyway, it's resulted in a slap across the back of the head for Frankie Morbidelli from Aleix Espargaro. And scathing was Frankie in his assessment, but as always, quite well spoken and eloquent the way he went about it, because he seems like a very well spoken young man. More or less has just called Aleix a hothead with anger management issues. And maybe he is. Whatever. I mean, this is one of those ones where Aleix gets the punishment, deservedly so, I think. Keep your hands to yourself when you're out there. We've seen it before and we'll see it again. I mean, it's not anywhere near as bad as like pulling a brake lever or things like that. This is like 2 guys riding slowly. He's giving him a whack. We've seen Casey Stoner, of all people, do it. I'm not really that outraged about it, but also when you do it, you will get punished for it and you deserve to get punished for it. And that is exactly what happened. As I mentioned earlier, we were talking about Fermin Aldeguer, and we're going to talk about him again right now. We are going to talk about him in regards to a VR46 ride, but technically the only ride still available on the grid is the HRC ride. But as we know, we're just waiting on confirmation, really, which I think we should probably get this week. Crossing the T's, dotting the I's on Marini's contract with HRC. That transfer will go across. So he'll leave his plum gig inside his brother's team and move on to the monumental task of turning Repsol Honda into a winning machine again. And I've given my thoughts on that in last week's Fallout video, so you're welcome to go and watch that as well. So where does that leave VR46? Now, with the improvement in Diggi's performances, I do always think there's recency bias in this. There is always recency bias in this. And the general consensus here is How can this guy not have a ride for next season? MotoGP race winner, doesn't have a job for next season. You know, he's been unfairly just shafted out into his ass and he's just been kicked out of the sport. And these teams don't respect race winners in MotoGP. Why aren't they clamoring over themselves to try and sign him? Look, he did nothing for about 35 races of his 40 race career, right? He had like one pole position or something, or a front row start or something. I can't remember what it was at Mugello that he had. Like, that was it. That was it. While there's 2 ways of looking at it. Either there's a lad at the end of his contract, at the end of his MotoGP career, just throwing caution to the wind, playing with settings, trying this, trying that, and it's coming together and it's clicking for him. And that kind of freeing energy has like galvanized him into this like top 5 rider. You know, if you signed him up again for next season, by the time you get to round 1, he's back to being the 8th best Ducati, which I think is a very real possibility. The other way of looking at it is, here's a lad who's struggled. They've changed something. He's found something. And this is the Diggia you would get from now on. I'm inclined to be in camp A on this because we've seen riders like this before. You know, the first one that comes to mind, and I could be wrong here, was like a Tony Aleix type, where as soon as contract season would roll around, this guy'd start winning races and stuff. It was crazy. And then you get there at the start of next season, you do nothing for the first 10 races. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. That just could be my memory playing up with me, but I do remember him. He was always good at the end of the season. He was never good at the start. So, and he just always used to keep getting a contract, and like, fair play to him. Is that what's happening here? Or is something really being found? Is Digi like a talent that we're going to lose that could have been something? And the caveat with all this conversation is it's all pointless because Uccio, who runs sort of the sporting operations for the VR46 team, I've read interviews with him where he's basically, they're not considering Digi. They are not considering him. So unless HRC are considering him, which I'd highly doubt, he's out. Right. So this conversation is null and void, really. Basically, Uccio's come out and said that they're talking to Fermin Aldeguer, talking to his people and talking to Bosco Scura about getting him out of his contract. And they're also talking to Tony Arbolino and his team about getting him across. They're the 2 options they're looking at. They have no interest in a rider that's been there for 2 years and did nothing for, like I said, the first 35, 36 races of his career and has come good now. They don't want that. They're not looking at that. They only want fresh young talents. Their goal is to bring rookies in and promote them up with that in mind. And I guess that sort of, you can maybe see a link there between where there was always the option that they could have tried move Bezzecchi onto a Pramac or something like that when it looked like Morbidelli needed a ride. And you could always say, well, Rossi would always have a home for Franco Morbidelli because he's one of his boys. And you could just snugly put him in an environment where he's under Rossi's umbrella again there, and there's no pressure on him. He can sort of find the pace at his own time. No, and now this makes sense because they don't want already established riders in that team. They want rookies. They want rookies in the team and spending 2, 3, 4 years with that rookie if they have to. But basically the point is to grow a rider, and they're willing to do that with the Spaniard in Fermin Aldeguer. And I think he is the favourite for the ride. And even if you look at it now, if you're looking, say if Digi was in this conversation, would you take Digi with his recent upturn in form? Or do you look across at Fermin Aldeguer, a raw talent who's just gone now and put 3 wins on the trot at a canter? He's just walked home in these 3 Grand Prix. He's unbelievable at the minute. I think that's undeniable form. As good as Digi's been, that is undeniable form from a kid. A guy's barely, he's even 20 yet, you know, and then, you know, you got Digi at 25 who's largely failed and then come good right at the end. I think I'd taking Fermin Aldeguer. Now, whether you want to debate taking Aldeguer over Arbolino, then we've got maybe a debate because while Arbolino's fallen away at the end of the season, he's second in the World Championship. His start of the season was exceptional and he led the World Championship over the second coming Pedro Acosta for quite a while during the season there. So if you look at it and go, well, Fermin Aldeguer is doing a you know, he's just coming good at the end, you know, when there's a ride up for grabs. I don't think that necessarily feels like this. I think this feels like a kid who's young and raw and really figured it out and really is showing his potential now. I think it's a bit harsh on Tony actually because he's had a really good season, but I'd be inclined to take Fermin over Tony Arbolino, to be honest. But I think either one of them is a good option for the VR46 team. And how much do they value not having a Spaniard? That's what you're going to ask yourself. Are they sitting there going, well, we have to take this kid because he's the next best guy, but he is Spanish. So do we just take Tony Arbolino just in case? But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what decision they go with. I think the favourite is definitely Fermin Aldeguer. I think he is the favourite for the ride. I think he's who they want. I think they see more upside in him than you do with Tony Arbolino, who took a few years to get going. in Moto2. And I know that it's taken Fermin a couple of years as well to get going, but younger. And he's just come straight into Moto2 and he's just, he showed that real raw talent straight away and now he's going bang. So yeah, tell me what you think of all the racing this weekend. 1 round to go. Who's got it for you? Who takes it? Is it possible? Can Martin actually do the unthinkable here? Win 2 races, put enough pressure on Pecco that he tightens up and falls back through the field and doesn't score enough points? Can it be done? We'll see. Thanks again. We will see you next week. This time next week after Valencia, we will have a world champion in MotoGP and we'll have a lot to talk about.